Can we get another microphone up here, please? Lordy, what is that about, people? Well, good afternoon to everybody. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Let me say a couple things. Let me preface this, if I will. We're not here to make any announcement about this grand jury at all. That is not our responsibility. So I'm going to say that again. We are not here to make any announcement about the grand jury decision. That is not our responsibility. I cannot tell you when that's going to happen. I do not know. Are we clear with that? Okay. Listen, the last time that we were here, I indicated that my expectation that when the grand jury makes its decision known, that people will govern themselves accordingly. I do not expect the worst, and I said then and I'm saying now, I expect the best of people. The vast majority of organizations in this community have been working very hard to train their members and their volunteers to exercise their rights in a manner that is productive and respectful to the wishes of the Brown family. I am encouraged by conversations between law enforcement and some protest groups. For at least 3 weeks, Chief Baumer, Chief Dotson, and others have been meeting to discuss a proposed set of rules of engagement following the announcement. That does not mean that there was negotiations or that these groups agreed to this. It was just a conversation of like things. No one agreed to all these rules, but it's something the police department thought was important for them to address and have a conversation with the individuals, protest groups in the community. The fact that we can sit around the table and have a conversation, even though there may be differing opinions, it is why I have confidence that we will come through this better and not the worse. Earlier today, the Justice Department set out news release about their efforts to help law enforcement to work with communities to minimize needless confrontations. Ron Davis, the Director of Cops Office at the Department of Justice, said, law enforcement officers are stewards of peace and protectors of the people, but above all else, they are custodians of the public trust. I couldn't agree more with that statement. We are all working together and working very sincerely to ensure that in the days ahead that we can preserve peace and maintain public trust. Our community is counting on all of us and activists to be a level head and focus on the long-term systematic change that must take place. Right now, not just this community, this state, and this country is looking at the St. Louis region, how we rise to the challenge of this community. I am convinced we're going to do what is right. We're going to be respectful of the protesters. We're going to be respectful of the residents of these communities. We're going to be respectful for the protesters' right to protest. But we also understand that the police need to protect themselves as well. We want a peaceful demonstration. It is meaningful. It is healthy. It is a legacy of this community and of this country that people have free speech regardless of how you feel. There'll be different opinions on both sides. I will hope and pray that they respect each other's opinions. It doesn't mean I have to agree with you, but it is necessary that I have respect for your opinion. If that's how you feel, that is how you feel. But understand, as all Americans, we have a law that we must be upheld, and we're going to do the very best that we can to protect that right. At this time, I'm going to give you my good friend, Mayor Francis Slade of the city of St. Louis, and we'll take it further in this process. Mayor Slade?
Right. Thank you, County Executive Dooley, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today, joining County Executive Charlie Dooley and Public Safety Director for the State of Missouri, Dan Isom, and I, as we share our thoughts with you as we come closer to a decision of the grand jury. As Charlie said, we do not know when the decision's coming out, but we expect it'll be coming very shortly, and we wanted to give you our thoughts as we go forward. Yesterday, the United States Attorney General Eric Holder, whose Justice Department, as you know, is currently undergoing an investigation of Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson and the Ferguson Police Department in general took the nearly unprecedented step of addressing this local judicial situation and the police responses to it. His statement acknowledged that the vast majority of police officers across the country honorably defend fellow citizens on a daily basis. They are dedicated to public safety, and we should be very, very proud of them. He said that the Federal Justice Department had issued new guidelines to help federal, state, and local law enforcement officers safeguard the constitutional rights of protesters while maintaining public safety. And he called on the protesters to conduct themselves peacefully. Also yesterday, Michael Brown Sr., in a courageous new video that many of you probably have seen, issued the same call as Attorney General Holder for peace and for change. No matter what the grand jury decides, he said, I don't want my son's death to be in vain. And I'm here to tell you that it can't be in vain, and that it won't be. For the past 100 days, County Executive Charlie Dooley and I, and our police commanders have been engaged in many conversations with community leaders and with many of the protest leaders about the days to come after the eventual decision by the grand jury. That is because we believe that it would be imprudent not to plan for protests regardless of what that decision might be. We have been criticized by some for sitting down with the protest leaders. The protest leaders have been criticized for sitting down with us. We did so because in similar situations in other cities, things ended up very, very badly. We do not want that for our city or our region. This is our city, this is our region, and we live here together. With that in mind, our police commanders engaged some protest leaders on rules of conduct. In person and on conference calls, the two sides have met about 5 times to discuss them. The police commanders and County Executive Charlie Dooley and I agreed to most of those rules because they made sense or we were already doing those things. We did not agree to some of the proposed rules because those rules would have limited the officers' ability to keep people and properties safe. The bottom line is that we instructed our police officers to protect the protesters' constitutional rights. We have directed them to use more active tactics only when necessary to keep people safe or to protect property. If there are protests, we expect some of the protesters will be disruptive. They will likely try, as they did in October, to inconvenience people to make a point. If protesters are nonviolent, police will not be aggressive. But if some protesters turn violent or are threatening, police will respond to keep everyone safe, including bystanders, the peaceful protesters, and the police officers themselves. When demonstrators are being civilly disobedient, they will, in most cases, be given a chance to adhere to the law before they are arrested. And then, if necessary, they will be arrested in a non-violent manner. Depending on the circumstances, they may be allowed to occupy public spaces longer than normally tolerated. That will be decided on a case-by-case basis. Our departments, our police departments, will address appropriately to protect themselves, not in an effort to intimidate protesters. Police tactics will not change based on words that protesters use, but only based on the actions that they undertake. Our goal, our job, and our prayer is that at the end of each day, everyone goes home safe. Police, the protesters, and people who are not involved in the protests. That there's no widespread damage to people's homes and businesses, and that we begin to heal. To close the racial divide, to make the changes needed to make St. Louis a more fair and just city for everyone. Charlie and I both strongly support law enforcement. The vast majority of our city and county officers are well-trained professionals who have done an incredible job during these protests, and even before that, keeping people safe and protecting people's rights. During Ferguson October, police officers were the targets of a great deal of invective. Some protesters tried to bait city police officers into taking aggressive action. Not one of our officers took the bait. They showed tremendous restraint and professionalism. They showed the world that they are one of the best police departments in the entire country. I fully expect that they will do their jobs just as well this time. It is important to remember that we are going to have much work to do together to make the needed changes to make St. Louis more fair, more just, and more prosperous for everyone. I ask everyone, the protesters, police officers, and everyone else to remember our underlying goal, and that is to protect the demonstrators' constitutional right and to keep everyone and their property safe. 65 years ago, President Harry Truman said, and I quote, "Once a government is committed to the principle of silencing the voice of opposition, it is only one way to go, and that is down the path of increasingly repressive measures until it becomes a source of terror to all of its citizens and creates a country where everyone lives in fear." St. Louis City and the region is not going down that path. Let me introduce now our director, State Director of Public Safety, and former Chief of the St. Louis Police Department, Dan Eisen.
Thank you, Mayor Slay. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. On behalf of Governor Jay Nixon, my boss, who asked me to engage in discussion with various coalition and protest groups about how we are going to conduct ourselves in law enforcement. This is always a good thing when people are dialoguing. And so in the past 2 weeks, and as recently as this morning, we have been communicating and cooperating to protect people, property, and citizens' constitutional rights. The Unified Command, St. Louis City, St. Louis County, and the Highway Patrol have also been involved in these discussions. They are prepared and they are dedicated to professionalism and to peace. The Unified Command has also set up direct lines of communication to ensure that law enforcement and citizens are dialoguing now and after the decision is made. To the demonstrators who want to be heard, we hear you. We are listening, and we will continue to protect your right to speech. To the property owners who have been worried and anxious in the past 2 weeks and hoping and wanting to be safe, we are going to protect your businesses so they can continue to strengthen the community and to give jobs and opportunities for people in that community. The Unified Command is not just unified in their operations, they are unified in their commitment to peace, property, and allowing people to have their constitutional rights.
At this time, we'll take questions.
You mentioned that the protesters will be able to stay in public places for longer periods of time than usual. If things are to get out of hand in a very bad way, will curfews be imposed on these particular protesters like they were back in August?
You know, I'm not going to be taking these, if this happens or that happened, I'm not going to be answering those questions. One thing I will tell you, we're going to take all this on a case-by-case basis. We're going to make decisions based on the situation that is presented, and in a way that will do the three things we talked about: protect people and property, and also protect the rights of the protesters as well.
Mayor Slay, or all gentlemen up here, will there be assurance at this time to the business owners who felt that the police stood down and let their businesses burn and let them be looted, that they can be assured that the police will not stand down, they will go in and help these people this time?
I think all three of us addressed that situation, that all businesses, regardless of where they are, they're going to be protected. First, it's going to be human life, people, the businesses, and the protesters. I think all three of us indicated those things are the top three things that we're concerned about. So again, it is the people in the community, the protesters, and the businesses, they're going to be protected.
You sent a message out. You said to those who want to be heard, we will allow you to be heard. What message are you sending to people who want to disrupt, who may come here with a goal to be disruptive?
Again, we're going to take that on a case-by-case basis, and we're going to do the appropriate things at that time.
Fair enough, but do you have a message for them, what they can expect if they don't follow their rules?
Violence will not be tolerated.
That's right.
Is
They're gonna be
number
arrested.
one. Violence is not going to be tolerated. Depending on the disruption, it's going to all depend on the circumstances,
Right.
how long it's tolerated, what kind of issues it's creating. But ultimately, we want to protect people and property. We want to protect constitutional rights of the protesters.
An example is, for example, is that if someone is jaywalking, we're not going to arrest them. If something else is done to businesses that can be harmful, we would take appropriate action.
Mayor Slay, County Executive Dooley, I've talked with a lot of ordinary St. Louisans over the last few days, and a lot of people are fearful about what's going to happen. Is there a reason for people around the St. Louis region to be worried about what happens after the grand jury, or are people just getting up in a tizzy for no reason?
Well, I'll tell you this is, first of all, it would be imprudent for us not to be prepared for some widespread unrest as a result of whatever the decision may be. So that's why we're taking these precautions. We need to be prepared for whatever happens, and we will be. We have no information that would cause us to advise any of our citizens that they should be in fear of their life or their property. We have no information that would cause us. We have no information that would cause us. Let me clarify that. Would cause us to tell people to do anything than their ordinary, what they would normally do. Go to work, go to school, those kinds of things. But again, we want to make sure that we are letting people know that if something does happen and there is, some unrest or protesting, that we're prepared to handle it.
Can you make...
Again, what some people indicated was,
Excuse me.
let me finish. Just wait. What I'm saying is that people have a right to feel how they feel. What we're saying is there is no reason to feel that way. Even during the last situation, there was some disturbances, but no one was seriously hurt. There was a life taken. So for all practical reasons, we have to feel that we have the same situation. What people saw, for whatever reason, they saw 5 minutes of a 12 hours shift. And that was not indicative of what took place at that time. People, for the most part, were safe in their homes. No one was seriously hurt. No police officers seriously hurt. And nobody lost their life. We expect the same outcome, even better.
So you said the police is going to be patient and is not going to take the bait, but for the last 2 nights in front of the Ferguson Police Department, not only has police taken the bait, but they've acted in a way that some might call overkill.
Again, I'm going to be clear about this. Wherever the action the police department takes, or the law enforcement officials take, someone would say that it's overreaching, it's overaggressive. Not necessarily so. What I said earlier, we have difference of opinions. We have to respect each person's opinion of what they're doing and why they're doing it. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to agree with me, but we believe we're going to do what's right for this community to keep everybody safe, even the protesters. We want to keep them safe as well.
And follow up on that, on Wednesday and Thursday night, the protests in Ferguson started out in a nonviolent manner. On Wednesday, the first appearance of the police, they came out with helmets, shields, batons, and last night there was less lethal munitions that were out there. What triggered that response? I know there's been said that police are going to come out and first talk with protesters wearing normal uniforms, but the first response to nonviolent protests was to come out in full gear.
Well, the information we have is that there wasn't less lethal equipment that was used. What we've tried to do is establish lines of communication, and that's what we've done. This morning we talked about how the interaction went between protesters and the police last night. And we were able to dialogue about what the police response was and the reaction of the protesters. And so we're going to continue to do that. We have those lines of communication set up, hopefully for every venue that we expect people to be at. And that's how we are going to make sure we manage the conflict between police and protesters.
Can you explain why the police responded wearing full gear at the very beginning of these protests? Still haven't answered why that was the first step the police took. And not saying that less than lethal munitions were used, but less than lethal munitions were out there and present.
Well, I can't say why they did that. I don't know why. But what I can tell you is that we are discussing it. We're in dialogue about it. And hopefully as we move forward with that dialogue, we will be able to resolve issues like that.
So were the police incorrect in responding initially with full gear?
I don't know that they were incorrect. The point is that we are trying to get to a place where we both have understanding on both sides. That's what we're trying to do. And so that comes through dialogue, and we will continue to dialogue. Our main objective is to make sure people are safe, to protect property, and to allow people to have their constitutional rights. We will continue to do that, and we will continue to have dialogue with protesters and any other group so we can get to that point.
Can we expect a statement possibly from one of your offices?
Is the Unified Command investigating or making any preparations in response to threats that have been made by Ku Klux Klan members online that seem to be credible threats of violence against protesters? Can you comment on, is there any investigation or preparations for that violence?
Let me say this. I'm not going to discredit what you just said, but there's a lot of rumors flying around about a lot of different things.
And are you investigating those rumors?
As far as I know, we're not. Some of them we are, and some of them we may not be. Okay? But what I'm saying is, though, that's one of the problems that we have with the media, quite frankly, is that you say things like that, and the public hears it, and they take it to heart, when a lot of times it's the farthest thing from the truth. And what we're here to tell you today is, let's step back a little bit. Take a breath. Let's stop thinking the worst of people or buy into what someone said as to what actually takes place. What we've said earlier, and we continue to say, we're going to act responsibly. We're going to act accordingly to whatever presents itself. We're doing it in a very peaceful way, if at all possible. That's our intent.
Right, but the police department is preparing for violence on part of the protesters. Are you preparing for violence from right-wing white supremacists?
What I'm saying is this. We are preparing for preventive measures for peace in our community. It's not about violence, it's about peace.
This is a question for all of you. Back in August, when the police were dealing with the protesters, particularly over on West Florissant Avenue, you had a whole bunch of them there. I know that obviously you have the National Guard that's going to be coming in as well, but resource-wise, if there's going to be a lot of people here dealing with the protesters, what about the other crimes that are happening in other areas, whether it's muggings, et cetera, et cetera? Are there going to be resources to deal with other things in other areas?
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? I mean, numbers?
Well, I can't give you numbers, but I will tell you that the rest of the areas, I can tell you from the city that I'm responsible for, will be adequately protected, and that's part of the reason why we have the National Guard coming in. They help back up our police officers. They're not going to be on the front lines with the protesters, but they will be helping back up our police officers so we have the resources not only to address any protests or other issues that may come as a result, but also to make sure that the people in our neighborhoods are safe as well.
Mr. Mayor, would it be unrealistic to tell people there's going to be no problems, this is going to be just a perfect situation where there's going to be no violence by the protesters, no aggressive actions by the police in response to that? Would that be unrealistic?
Yes.
Sir,
Back
may
in
I ask
August,
you?
there was a lot of what you would call collateral damage. People being tear gassed in their yards, people being hit by rubber bullets who were not committing any crimes. What are you going to do differently in terms of protecting the protesters and protecting the property and not just collectively punishing anyone who happens to be outside when certain people are doing, committing violent acts?
Well, the police departments have been working over the past 100 days to do sensitivity training to their officers. But I think the biggest key, and I'll continue to go back to this, is that we have been dialoguing with various people throughout the community. And so I believe that we have gotten to a point where we have some understanding about how we're going to interact with each other as this thing unfolds. And so my hope is that because of that, we will not have the necessity to do any of that this time.
Can you speak a little bit to the content of some of that training? What new things have officers learned, or should they have learned from this training that they have received?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is to try to work on restraint. Try to understand people's perspective, right? That people have fear and have anger, and we need to have some understanding of that, some empathy for it, and also a little bit of patience. So I think those are the things that officers are learning, and I believe that they're going to demonstrate that this time.
May I ask, gentlemen, can you characterize this document? How many do you completely agree with the protesters on? How many in part? How many do you reject? And the reactions?
And when
Yes.
is it in effect? Is it
Can we get
already
one
in
question
effect?
at a time, please?
Yeah, here's what I will tell you. If you read that, it'll give you all those answers. It's all in there.
Okay, we
It
take
tell-
one more
It
question.
tells you what the request was, and then what the response is. Now, nothing's in effect. Okay, this is not considered an agreement. There were no negotiations. These are issues. This was an effort to try to just engage with protesters and leadership as a line of communication. What are their concerns? What are they looking at? What are things? That was very helpful to us in order for us and our law enforcement to do our job. And I think the most important thing about this, and we can, I don't want to start, arguing over what it means or what it is, but I will tell you that what this means to me is that demonstrates there has been some real, significant, meaningful discussions and conversations between some within the protest community that don't represent everybody, and government as well as law enforcement, so that we have a better understanding going forward, which I think will help make everybody safer, protesters and the police as well. But it'll tell you exactly there the things that we were agreeing to and the things that we agreed to with caveats and the things that we couldn't agree to and why.
A response, not a settlement.
It's not a settlement. This was not a negotiation. This is no settlement. There was no effort for that. It was mostly an effort to engage in conversation and communication, and I think it was successful in that regard.
We'll take one more question, then we have to get
Mr.
into
Mayor
another.
or anybody.
That's the final question.
Number 18, police will provide public information that makes clear the chain of command. What is that chain of command? What agencies? What are the names of people who are making the decisions?
Yeah, I would be making the decisions in the city of St. Louis as the mayor of the city of St. Louis. The police chief and our public safety director report to me. In the city of St. Louis, Police Chief not Dan Eisman, he was our former police chief.
He still loves it. He still loves it.
He was our last chief. Sam Dotson is in command of his police force. He reports to Richard Gray, who is a civilian and is our public safety director, and both of them report to me.
And in St. Louis County, it would be the same difference. Would be the county executive is in charge with the police chief, working in consultation with the county executive and the police commission.
What about Ferguson, since the PD?
Again, St. Louis County is taking care of the Ferguson situation. That's the same unified command as well. Thank you so very much.
If you all have any